Good morning, everybody, and thank you all so much for being here and for being a part of this. I see that we have a nice size audience, and we have Sophia Edwards in the room, and we've got Dr. Forrester in the room, so we can get started. So my name is Rhoda Barrett. I work in the Academic Literacies program at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and I'm going to function as your guide to some extent to this morning's proceedings. So we're here to discuss AI, and it has been a hot topic internationally in academic circles and creative circles, in areas to do with manufacturing, automation. It touches on basically every aspect of our lives. This semester, I had the opportunity to offer it as the broad topic for a course that I'm teaching, and so had the opportunity to learn a lot more. I also sit on the ICT committee at St. Augustine, and it's an issue that we've been grappling with. How are we going to, in academia, treat with the use of AI, and whether or not it's something we should be welcoming, embracing, or something we should be concerned about with respect to our various jobs at the UWI. So I was very glad that my forward-thinking colleagues in Catalp had decided that this was the topic that we were going to be discussing today. So to not make the proceedings too long, I'm going to wrap up and hand over to Sophia to do her bit, and then we're all going to sit back and listen to what I'm sure will be a very enlightening presentation from Dr. Forrester. So Sophia, over to you.
Thank you, Rhoda. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're hearing me. It is my immense pleasure to be the one chosen to introduce our presenter this morning, who will speak on what I determine as an oxymoronic topic of artificial intelligence. He is Dr. Clive Forrester, a continuing lecturer in the Department of English Language and Literature at the University of Waterloo. He teaches courses in academic writing, technical writing, linguistics, and Caribbean language and culture. Seems like everything under the sun. His research interests are forensic linguistics, discourse analysis, Creole linguistics, and writing studies. Dr. Forrester is the current president of the Society for Caribbean Linguistics and the editor of the forthcoming volume titled Intersections of Language, Rights, and Social Justice in a Caribbean Context from Language Science Press. A really lovely bio, I think. Impressive. We eagerly anticipate receiving his real, genuine, bona fide, authentic intelligence on the topic, ethical uses of artificial intelligence in academic writing. We welcome you, Dr. Forrester.
Thank you very much, Sophia. I want to tell you, in addition to the bio we read a while ago, I'm a very good cook as well.
That's even more impressive.
I should have added that.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. I can do some wicked fried dumpling. So, good. It's very good to be here this morning. Thank you, Caroline, for this invitation to do a short presentation for your organization. If it is possible, it would be nice to see some of the faces, because some of the names I recognize. I haven't seen Clover in a very long time. Cicada is here, Sherelle is here, Ardeen is here. All of those persons I haven't seen face to face in a very long time. So please, if you're able to enable your camera, that would be so nice to see some of these faces. If not, that's fine. Okay, I have, I guess, a few slides that I might want to share. So I can share my screen. Okay. All right. So how will I do this? So I want to be able to share the screen and still see everybody's faces. So just give me 1 second while I set that up. Okay. Hold on. Okay, everybody can see what I'm showing here, but I'm not able to see your faces. So how would I do that now? 1 second. Ah, okay, good. Now I'm seeing the faces. All right. Okay, all right. So everybody's seeing the slide that I have here on the screen. That's correct. Just give me a thumbs up, Sophia, if you're seeing it. All right, good. All right, so my fascination with artificial intelligence, especially as it relates to teaching and writing, started late last year. And what happened was that the Atlantic ran an article entitled "The College Essay is Dead." And I found it kind of unusual because, you know, here I am preparing to teach another term of college writing, and somebody's telling me that the college essay is dead. And, you know, after having read the article, I started to agree with a lot of the points that the author raised, especially in light of what it appears this new developing technology could do. So in the article, the author talks about the fact that ChatGPT was able to reproduce full essays in under a minute from the usual essay type prompt that a professor will use inside their classroom. And a number of these professors looked at these output from ChatGPT and determined that they could earn a grade of B, right? Maybe even a B plus in some instances. Mind you, the essays were the kind of essays that you'd find from typical undergraduate writing, you know, with the filler fluff. But this is undergraduate writing, and this was the output that was being generated by the software. A student at the University of Canterbury, New Zealand, was interviewed by her student newspaper, and her comments appeared in the Atlantic article. And essentially, what she said in justification of using the artificial intelligence was that I attend all the classes, all the tutorials, all the lectures, I do the readings, I understand the content, but I think I would be penalized because I'm not very eloquent in my essay writing skills. And as such, I used artificial intelligence to write my essay. The university academic integrity policy says that I shouldn't I should get the assistance of somebody to write my essay. Well, ChatGPT isn't somebody. And that is why I use it to write my essay. And this is how the student justified how they would, you know, use this artificial intelligence to structure their essay. Well, in her case, I think she used it to write the bulk of the essay and handed it in and got her grade. So this was in December. And I said to myself, well, I kind of heard about ChatGPT in the background, and I'm like, how is this thing different from a regular search engine? So I decided to give it a try for myself. So I have some output here from my early experimentations with ChatGPT. Now, it might not be very clear on your screen, so I'll kind of just read what I have. So one of the first prompts that I gave ChatGPT was to create an alternate rhyming poem in the Jamaican language. And this is the output here. Here's a short poem in the Jamaican language. Me day upon the lane to find my pot of gold. Me trod and trod again till my feet them sore and cold. But me never give up yet. Me know me have to reach my goal. To find that pot of gold and never to sell my soul. So me just keep on moving upon the road of righteousness till me find the happiness and live my life in bliss. Kind of cheesy, but for a person like myself who's taught Jamaican Creole at the university level, at York University, this is exactly the kind of point. As a matter of fact, it's better than the output that students would have created in that class, even if they've done the class for like a few months. So I decided to keep on testing ChatGPT and see what it could output where Jamaican language is concerned. So I do a limerick style poem in the Jamaican language, and that's the output there. Here's a short limerick style poem in Jamaican. The sun a shine so bright, for give it all the light. The breeze a blow so cool, for keep a heart a rule. We have to enjoy the day and live it up in the right way. So I said, do a haiku in the Jamaican language. And then finally, create a rhyming couplet political satire about mongoose and mangoes in the Jamaican language. And here's the output. The mango them a rat, the mongoose them a plot. And I said to myself, but where is this output coming from? How exactly does ChatGPT work? And that is when I started to investigate the architecture behind the software. You know, what exactly is going on when ChatGPT creates an output? When you put in a prompt and an output comes out. I explained this concept. Well, actually, the person who explains this concept really good in the paper is Dr. Karen Booth. He would have been here today. Sadly, he had a family emergency. He is the co-author on the paper that we are working on. And he was actually the one who gave me the idea of doing this joint publication based on some of the discussions that I was having on Facebook. So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that is designed to generate new original content rather than simply recognize or classify existing content. It is based on deep learning algorithms that use large databases to identify patterns and generate new content that is similar to what was learned or what has been learned. So the best way to explain how ChatGPT works is that it takes a very large data set. Where does this data set come from? Predominantly a website called Common Crawl. And Common Crawl is like a database of every website. Billions of web pages that can be accessed through this website. And you could search right now called Common Crawl. And a good amount of the data, if not like all the data that ChatGPT uses comes from Common Crawl. And if you essentially have access to all the publicly published information up until 2021, you could answer just about any question, right? And this is essentially what ChatGPT has as a part of its learning process. It has access to this large, extremely large volume of data published in a variety of languages on a variety of topics. And as such, it is able to output naturally sounding dialogue that, based on the information that it can extract from this database. It is possible to train, and so the GPT means generative pre-trained, right? So the organization called OpenAI develops this software called ChatGPT, Chat Generative Pre-trained, and it's pre-trained on this very large database from the website Common Crawl. But it's also possible to pre-train large language models on specific data sets. So for instance, it's possible to pre-train it on data sets which comprise of information from the medical field or the legal field. And as such, that particular AI software would specialize in outputting natural language responses to questions about the law, medicine, chemistry, or in our particular case, academic writing, fine? Aspects of literature, you name it. So that is essentially on a basic level how ChatGPT works. In chapter 2 of the article that I shared with you, the draft article that I shared with you, we try to explain in a fairly succinct way how the architecture of the software works. And it's extremely fascinating. And to think that ChatGPT is now only in its 4th iteration. So the version of ChatGPT that most of us access is ChatGPT 3.5. To access ChatGPT 4, which is faster, more accurate, and has a few more safety features, you'd have to pay $20 a month, $20 a month to access that, the latest version of the software. But ChatGPT 3.5 is good enough for just about any kind of prompt that the average person could throw at it. So, when I started to investigate exactly this emerging software, I was blown away by the number of things that it could do with such ease. I'm talking about in seconds. So most of the prompts will return a response in under 10 seconds. Even if you ask ChatGPT to produce like a long form essay, maybe 500, 700 words, it can return a response in under 10, maybe 15 seconds. So this was late December of 2022. And I was already posting about it on social media. And in January, in the first week of the winter term, ChatGPT was already overloaded by new users. So it was impossible to access the software without waiting an hour or two before they could effectively get on and use it to generate a prompt or something like that. This is the first week of classes in the winter term. Before students were even starting to get their assignments and so on, people were overloading the system already, fine? And I knew, because I was always using ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT almost every other day for a variety of different things. And I noticed that the first week of the winter term, the software was completely overloaded. So before I spoke with this organization, I had another presentation with a group of translators, the Jamaican Translators Association. I spoke with them about the benefits of using artificial intelligence in language services. They were fairly receptive to the presentation, and I gave them some ideas about how a software like ChatGPT could be used, particularly in translation services. Language translation is one of those linguistic language areas which has been under constant interaction with technology of late. Fine. When Google Translate was developed some years ago, it was almost like a breakthrough in translation technology for persons who, simply needed immediate and urgent translation services, but simply could not afford the price of a translator. Now, if you've ever used Google Translate, you'll notice that it is not very good at doing translations, even in quote unquote popular languages like French, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and so on, right? It's not very good at the output that it uses whenever it does a translation. Google Translate is good enough if you want to, say for instance, have a quick conversation or send a quick message to somebody in a foreign language. especially if you're on the street and you have your phone, you can actually talk into Google Translate and show the person the phone, and it translates it into their language. Not a good translation, but good enough to get directions, to find out where the nearest restaurant is, and so on and so forth. Here's the difference with ChatGPT. It is able to do kinds of translations that Google Translate is at present totally unable of doing, totally incapable of doing. What kind of translation is this? One of the things that I asked ChatGPT to do was to explain what's called quantum computing, which is a very technical area of computer science. Explain quantum computing as an expert in the field. And it gave me an output. And then I said, no, translate all of this into Spanish. And it did so, as usual, under 10 seconds. So here I have an essay that is from allegedly an expert in the field of computer science that was translated into Spanish. So it was done in English and then translated into Spanish in under 10 seconds. There are not many translators who are able to translate effectively text that deals with quantum computing. You'd have to have knowledge about quantum computing as well as knowledge and near bilingual literacy in both of the languages that you're operating in, whether from English to Spanish, Spanish to French, or whatever. Google Translate is not able to do this. The average translator is not able to do this, but ChatGPT did it in under 10 seconds. And it was very fascinating, the interaction that we had in that forum. So I'm going to just now jump to the ethical recommendations, fine? Skipping across most of the article that I sent you just now. Hopefully everybody is able to access it. You could just skip all the way to chapter 4. In section 3 of the article, we talk about how universities have been responding to the increasing use of generative AI in academic contexts. And the responses have been varied. The usual suspects banned ChatGPT outright, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. And they could do this by simply using a firewall because it's a government that provides internet, not individual corporate entities. So if it's a government that controls the internet, the government can simply ban ChatGPT for residents in a particular country. Incidentally, Italy actually had a ban on ChatGPT in the early part of this year for privacy concerns, right? The Italian government felt that ChatGPT, understandably, could be used for nefarious means. It could be used to deceive people. And it was concerned about how user data was collected. That ban was lifted, I want to say, by mid-April of this year, after OpenAI ensured Italy that it would put in place a number of measures for Italian users, especially. So anybody who is accessing ChatGPT from an IP address in Italy will actually have to do a few more things before they can access the software. One of those things includes verifying your age. So to use ChatGPT in a place like Italy, you have to be an adult. You have to be at least 18 years old. Other universities have taken different approaches. The Australian approach, as it was sensationalized in the Guardian newspaper, was that professors are going back to pen and paper, right, as a means to combat the encroachment of artificial intelligence. My university, the University of Waterloo, was kind of late to the game. We responded to what was happening officially in February, But what we did that a number of other universities here in Canada failed to do, like York University, University of Toronto, was that we established a working group that would more or less monitor how AI, the current AI, as well as AI to come, will influence the, the academic context. So the responses have been varied, but largely the response from North American, European universities has been to encourage the use of artificial intelligence, but be mindful that it does not violate the existing academic integrity policies of the various institutions. So that has been approached. It has been more instructive than punitive, so to speak. I tried to do a search of the policy that the University of the West Indies has, but I couldn't find one. So if anybody knows if the University of the West Indies has an official policy, and by official, I mean something coming from at least the level of a dean as it relates to the use of artificial intelligence in whatever kind of academic study. So some of the ethical recommendations here. So the first one I have is to start small. So there are a number of things that academic writing instructors have to do inside the classroom and before you get to the classroom that require your attention, but these things are peripheral to actual writing, right? Some of these things that I discuss, that we discuss in the article, have to do with things like understanding how to structure a prompt. Now, the output that you get from ChatGPT is highly dependent on the quality of the prompt that you put in. Fine. So an example that we give in chapter 4.1 is like a sample prompt. Rewrite my course description below so that it deals with a different time frame. So imagine you have a course dealing with, let's say, post-emancipation. You're looking at like the 1850s up until the beginning of the 20th century, right? Early 1900s. And you ask ChatGPT, rewrite my course description below so that it deals with a different time frame. Now, that particular prompt lacks sufficient information to produce the best possible output. You may well get an output that is satisfactory, but a far more robust output is likely with just a few small adjustments to the prompt along the following lines. Rewrite my course description in a more conversational and engaging tone for upper-level undergraduate students. Expand the time frame of the course content by 10 years on either side of the specified period, and ensure the description is between 300 to 350 words. Much more detail in that prompt. And essentially, what you've done is hopefully generate a really good course description along the lines of what you had intended. The good thing with the output that is generated by ChatGPT is that you have the ability to infinitely regenerate responses. However, if you recall the first prompt that I used, simply rewrite my course outline and expanding the timeline. If you kept regenerating responses from ChatGPT to that prompt, it will never approach the quality of the output that will come from the second prompt. So even though you could infinitely regenerate your responses, the quality of the output is always constrained by the initial prompt that the user inputs. So one of the things that I've used ChatGPT to do at the start of the term is to tweak course descriptions, to generate targeted reading lists, to work on rubrics, as well as inform the policy inside the classroom about how we will use artificial intelligence. So that's another way that you could start to do some of the small tasks in preparation for writing. And this is completely ethical. Indeed, a lot of the policies that we have today about how to incorporate artificial intelligence into the academic context was in fact written by artificial intelligence, right? With, of course, a bit of human modification. So my advice for persons who are a little bit intimidated about stepping into this arena of using artificial intelligence is to start small, right? A lot of these things that I'm talking about require your attention, and would usually take an hour or two out of your day. Fine. I use ChatGPT routinely to generate discussion topics and discussion prompts that I can use in class. Normally, this would take me an hour and a half, maybe, before each class, several times a week. This adds up to scores of hours per term. And if my memory serves me correctly, the teaching load of a lecturer at a place like the University of Technology is something like 14 contact hours per week. Right? Now imagine if you'd have to be doing these small tasks, which take an hour and a half before each class. Right? ChatGPT could simply eliminate that aspect of tedium from the life of the academic with just a few carefully crafted prompts. The next step up is to straight up turn the software into your personal assistant. Fine. So once you start to get comfortable with how the prompts are generated and how the software is used, now you have to start thinking about creative and innovative ways in which ChatGPT will become, an assistant to you, the instructor. And as I mentioned, some of the examples we discussed in this chapter here are things like designing rubrics, designing discussion prompts, designing, ideas for classroom activities. All of these things you would have to do on a regular basis before your class, during the weekend, whenever you get the chance. Us academic writing instructors will have to be doing these things to prepare for class. The good thing with ChatGPT is not only could you generate these ideas on ChatGPT, you could actually test them on ChatGPT. So it is possible, for instance, to generate discussion topics and ask, or you could input, you could play the part of a student and ask ChatGPT to either respond as the instructor or play the part of the student. Fine. So it is possible to ask ChatGPT to be in a particular role. Good. Which brings us to the third example I use here, which is to start to explore difficult and sensitive topics. The example that I discuss in this section comes from my own personal classroom at the University of Waterloo. So I teach a lot of students who are international students, and I teach academic writing and technical writing to students from the Faculty of Engineering, from the Faculty of Mathematics and Computer Science. The dominant demographic inside this classroom is Asian, Eastern Asian, so Chinese, South Korean, and Southern Asian, Indian, Pakistani, and so on. That's the dominant ethnicity inside this classroom. Early in the pandemic, one of the things that was happening in Canada and elsewhere in the world was anti-Asian racism, simply because COVID-19 originated in China. So anybody who looked Asian, Chinese, Japanese, South Korean, Malaysian, was under the constant threat of harassment from, whether it be, disparaging comments or physical assault, which happened several times here in Canada against Asian persons. And even some Asian students felt discriminated against just by being here in Canada, which is something that they've never experienced in their home country, obviously. How do I talk about racism inside this classroom in a context where of 25 students, I would have 22 of them being of Asian descent, one student being Black, and maybe 3 female students? How do I insert, and I'm a racialized person of Afro-Caribbean descent, how do I broach the topic of racism inside this classroom with, timid undergraduate students, some of whom do not share the, kind of nuanced understanding of race and how race intersects with things like, for instance, gender and location? How do I broach this topic without, being worried about how students will or may not feel offended, feel harmed by topics like these? Because I've heard from students that here in Canada, that whenever the topic of racism comes up in class, everybody turns around and looks at them as the sole Black student inside that classroom. And racialized students, minoritized students, shouldn't have to carry this emotional labor. One of the things that is possible is to actually use simulated dialogues on ChatGPT. The example that I use in section 4.3 is of a simulated debate, not necessarily one that has anything to do with racism, but it is possible that I could, before class, knowing that full well I'm going to deal with an aspect of race and racism in class today, practice my presentation or practice the topic that I plan to discuss with ChatGPT, putting in place parameters to ensure that I do not sound offensive, I do not offload unnecessary emotional work on some of these students, and at the same time, I am, being respectful. So I could do this in preparation for class, or better yet, I could go to class and ask students to individually work through a simulated dialogue that will use parameters that I design on their own with ChatGPT, and then at the end have a discussion as a collective. So there is something about ChatGPT so it's obviously artificial intelligence, so there's no risk that it will be offended. But the responses are so human-like that there's a chance you might forget that you're dealing with a machine. And as such, you would be, fully invested in delivering your honest feelings in a safe, low-risk environment. So this is another possible way that it could be used in your academic writing classroom. And finally, just 1 second here. Yes, so finally, the last issue that I look at is after you, the instructor, have developed a level of comfort, it's time now to empower your students. And I leave you with a quick example of how I explain things in this section. Close to the end of the term this year, as usual, attendance falls off precipitously. This is unavoidable, right? It happens in Jamaica, it happens in Canada too, right? It happens all over the world. You start with a class of 25, and in the last few weeks, you have a class of 6. Fine. At this portion in the course, we were talking about designing professional portfolios. You know, putting together your CV, a cover letter, designing a business card, and so on. So I asked my students, how many of you have a LinkedIn profile? And most of them had a LinkedIn profile, but it was kind of a ghost page, right? They said, well, I have LinkedIn, but I don't use it. And it feels a bit pretentious to put anything on LinkedIn because I haven't accomplished anything. Well, who am I? I'm a first-year student. So I said, all right, let's go to ChatGPT. So I asked my students to write a description of what it is that they're studying at the university right now, include some of their interests and what they'd like to be doing professionally once they leave the university. I asked them to put that into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to generate a LinkedIn summary that they could put on their profile. And they did that, and it generated a summary, and they all put it on their profiles. And next I said, now copy that profile, that summary that you have on your profile, put it into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to recommend some online courses that you could do. And they did that, and ChatGPT output, I think I said so the parameters that I gave was that you should recommend at least 5 online courses that you can complete based on the summary that you have on your profile. And they did that. And then I asked the students randomly, just choose one of these online courses. And guess what? And this is something that they didn't know themselves. Everybody at the University of Waterloo has a license to link to LinkedIn Learning, which is like a repository of thousands of online courses. The students weren't aware of this. So I said, all right, pick one of the courses that ChatGPT recommended, find it or something similar on LinkedIn Learning, and complete that course by the end of the week. Because why not? These courses are fairly simple courses. You could complete them in a week, maybe a little bit more than a week. I said, complete it by the end of the week, and it will generate for you a certificate or a badge that you can put on your LinkedIn profile. And I said, if you've done all of that, send me a message on LinkedIn, and I will put a reference on your LinkedIn profile as well. And just in that one class, by using quick thinking and a bit of playing around with ChatGPT, I was allowing these students to curate a digital profile, to create a digital presence. And this is something very important. If I had come to class simply doing a presentation about curating your digital image, it would have been useful, I suppose. But what I did instead was to kind of think on my feet and design a kind of action-based method of bringing the lesson to life, right? This is precisely what I wanted to do that day. Talk to students about curating a digital identity, because nowadays, nobody is going to hire you unless they've Googled your name. So I asked my students, what will they find when they Google your name? They better find something because it's problematic if they find you on social media doing all manner of nonsense. But if they can't find you any at all, that also raises some alarm bells. So you should ensure that you control the digital image that you put out there. And right there in class, we started to curate the digital identities of these students. So those are 4 ways that we've thus far included in the draft of this paper here. The final way, and I think I'm going to add this one later this week, is to start to think beyond the confines of the traditional long-form essay. There are a number of skills that we want our students in our writing classes to accomplish. And not just writing classes, but any university class. There are a number of skills that we want students to accomplish in any of these classes. we need to start to ask ourselves whether or not the long form traditional composition is the only way to assess these kinds of skills. There are a number of possibilities once we start to explore the way that ChatGPT could be used. And I'll tell you a few quick ones that I used this term as well. I teach a brand new course that I designed at the University of the Waterloo called Language, Life, and Literature in the Caribbean. And one of the topics that we dealt with in the course was the Windrush generation and what happened to these early West Indian immigrants who migrated to the UK in the 70s and how their lives have been impacted by racism and deportation threats many decades later. Usually, it would, as students might be asked to design an essay on something like this or design some kind of writing, and that is perfectly fine. But what I did instead was ask students to come up with ideas, use ChatGPT to generate a comic in a frame by frame setting, generate the dialogue and the narrator's voice for a comic in a panel by panel setting. And then I had an online tool that I subscribed to that I shared with my students, and they, rather than work on essays, created comic strips that dealt with the Windrush generation. Very interesting comic strips, and they were very involved in creating these, some of them elaborate comics. And that's just one example of how I used ChatGPT to more or less get students to critically engage with a topic, but not produce an essay as the evidence that they're using, that they're critically thinking about the particular issue. So the college essay isn't dead, but alas, it is not as prominent as it is these days. There are a number of different ways that we can involve student participation and student understanding in whatever area. And the possibilities are endless once we have the patience to be creative, be mindful, and most of all, stay true to who we are as teachers of academic writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Forrester. So now I want to open up the floor to questions because I'm sure my colleagues will have loads of questions. I know I have at least 3 questions. So let me thank you for that. Thank you for the information, for sharing the article, and of course for all of the ideas that you would have triggered in our minds this morning. So with respect to the Q&A, can you raise your hands on the use the raise hand tool so that way I can call persons in the correct order once they've got questions. Okay, so people being shy. I am not a shy person at all, Dr. Forrester. So the first question I have for you is, are you using the free version or the paid version of it on a daily basis? That's my first question, because
Okay.
I've tried the free version.
Yes. All right. I would say keep using the free version. I tried the paid version for a little while, but I'm like, for what I'm doing, it's not much different. Good. So they claim that the paid version is faster, but by faster they mean what, like 1 second less? All right, fine.
Is that the major distinction between the free and the paid version?
That's a major distinction. It's faster. The responses tend to be a little bit more accurate, and it is a bit more adherent to community standards. So ChatGPT is still evolving, and it is trying to ensure that certain kinds of explicit content don't go out to users, because as you notice, there's no age restriction on who can use the technology, at least in our part of the world.
Okay.
So the paid version, they claim that it is more accurate, it is safer, and it's whatever else. But for the regular free version, it's good enough for what most of us will be using it for on a daily basis.
Okay, so I'm going to step back. I'm going to allow Caroline and anybody else that has questions to ask questions, but I'm coming back.
Okay,
Caroline.
Yeah, thank you, Rhoda. Thank you so much, Clive, for that. It really has got the wheels turning in so many directions in terms of what you said, the breadth of what you said. I want to go right back to the ethical question now, and center that. Okay, I wanted to, I have heard that one of the problems or the issues with ChatGPT is that it's based on these large data sets based on everything that's on the internet. So in terms of the accuracy of what it produces when our students use it, I mean, do we have to put in a level where they have to verify what ChatGPT says, ChatGPT produces, or is there now some maybe other kind of AI that does that kind of work and makes a cut in terms of what is credible and what is authentic and what is that's my first question.
All right, so that's actually a very important question. No, ChatGPT is very good at generating naturally sounding responses. It's not very good at citations, even if you ask it to include citations. What tends to happen, I've found, is that with citations, it might get the name wrong, it might get the version of the article wrong, the DOI might be off or something like that. And in some cases, it's just straight up made up citations and references. Fine. So you have to check the accuracy really and truly. Now, so most of us are familiar with how Turnitin works, right? So Turnitin is also a kind of artificial intelligence. And what Turnitin does is that it checks an essay that you submit against a database of other essays, as well as stuff which is published online. Fine. So when you run an essay through Turnitin, it gives you a score to tell you whether or not this essay was plagiarized, to what extent this essay is using content directly lifted from somewhere else. Now, persons have been using ChatGPT and running it through Turnitin, right? And Turnitin will bring back a score, say, because Turnitin now has a plugin from a developer who created a software called ChatGPT 0, where Turnitin can now check to what extent a particular submission was generated by AI. However, a smart student and a determined student, a student who is determined to cheat, will have access to a variety of other AI tools. So it's possible to generate an essay in ChatGPT and then run it through another AI software called Quillbot that rephrases it so that it sounds like a human. And then you could run that through Turnitin, and it will tell you that this essay was created by a human, when in fact it wasn't. So even the measures, the software measures that we have in place to, kind of curtail academic dishonesty have a fairly high rate of failure, right? Especially in combination with a student who is determined to cheat.
Okay, all right, thanks. Chair, can I have,
I see Dr. Freddie James from St. Augustine has a question. So, Freddie.
Well, thanks, Chair. It's both more of a comment than a question, I think.
Yes.
In that, and thanks for your presentation and enlightening us on certain things. ChatGPT happened to be one of the things that I've been following from very, very early, before it even dropped, because of a connection with somebody who was involved with it. Now, a lot of focus is being given to ChatGPT without necessarily putting the focus on AI period, because you don't have to use ChatGPT to do your essay. So I agree with you that what educators have to do, in particular higher education institutions, whether we like it or not, would be forced to look at alternative ways of assessing
Right.
our students. Because, I mean, Canva has a program. In Canva, you could create your docs using AI, and it will create, you know, your paragraphs for you and that kind of thing. So we are inundated with the technology, and it will just continue to evolve and perfect itself, so that we would not find means to really make those checks. Because like when Quillbot came out, I mean, it was, and it's evolving, as something happens, it keeps evolving. So my question, this is the question part of it. How should higher education institutions assess students to avoid falling into these kind of essay traps?
Right. Very good question. Thank you for that question, Dr. James. Now, even the answer to your question will have to be an evolving answer as well. As you rightly pointed out,
Correct.
we will have to, we will have to start to think about, innovative ways that we can assess students, even in a writing class that does not require producing the traditional long form essay. Fine. So we're going to have to start to think about very creative ways. The other thing is that us here, our expertise here lies in teaching writing, not in policing students. And we should allow the classroom space to morph into some kind of surveillance camp, because this does not mimic writing outside of academia. Right? So nobody who writes outside of academia is under constant surveillance, because they're not trusted and people might be thinking that they're going to cheat. So rather than, kind of being preoccupied with catching the cheater and, coming up with policies, because all of these policies have tiny loopholes. And if you don't believe me, just get a student to read it. A student can see the loopholes fairly easily. We can't, right? As a student who wants to cheat, and mind you, it's only a small percentage of students that will go the extent that, some cheaters will. Fine. So we shouldn't be preoccupied with trying to catch the cheaters and revising punitive measures for that very tiny fraction of students. Most students, I find, even with the technology that is available, actually want to do the work themselves. They actually want to get something out of it, and they're genuinely interested in improving their aptitude at writing, communication, and so on. The problem, of course, is that even the best intentioned student finds the constant barrage of essays as drudgery. The average undergraduate student has 4 to 5 courses in one term. And of those 4 to 5 courses, that student will have to produce maybe 3 essays per course. And all of them tend to be due around the same time. So even the honest student, even a student who wants to do all the work, given the framework under which academic writing operates and how university studies is structured, just the very way that we are doing things might push even an honest student to cheat. So that is what actually I think we should be careful of, Dr. James. Not sure if there are any other questions. I'm seeing some discussion in the chat area.
There's some discussion in the chat about Quillbot and the usefulness of Quillbot. I want to follow on with the question from Dr. Lee, and I know Caroline has another question. you made the point, Dr. Forrester, that academic writing, that's our background, that's our area.
Yes.
And it means that certainly in my unit, all of the courses, there's a certain amount of writing that students have to do. As a matter of fact, the majority of our assessments will be on writing. And then, of course, there are oral presentations. Oral presentations go for maybe 10%, but the majority of the writing, the majority of the coursework for the course, right, the majority of the assessment is writing. How, I don't see how much leeway we have with respect to creativity with in terms of our assessment. So if you had to deal with a course where the majority of the assessment is focused on student writing and getting into writing a logical, coherent, responsible fashion, how would you approach a more creative approach to assessments?
Okay, all right. So I mean, my response here is always just to tell you about some of the experiences, challenges, failures that I've had with experimenting with this kind of thinking outside of the essay box with some of my own courses. So I mentioned the course Language, Life, and Literature in the Caribbean, and how I wanted students to critically engage with the Windrush issue, right? West Indians migrating to the United Kingdom after the Second World War up until the 70s, and then faced with deportation threat in recent times because the immigration laws have changed. I wanted them to critically engage with that issue. We had a discussion in class, and I wanted to assess how well they understood what was taking place. So rather than have them write an essay, I said, design a comic. Ask ChatGPT to output potential dialogue for your comic in a panel by panel frame. At the end of the course, one of the things that we had to do was, so I put students into various groups according to island names. So we had Jamaica, we had Trinidad, we had Guyana, and we had Barbados. And students in their groups, I told them that as your final project in your group, you need to work on designing a character for inclusion in a masquerade festival that we have in the Caribbean. So it could be John Canoe, it could be Carnival, it could be something like that. None of these students are artists. So I said, you know what? Use AI. What you need to do is come up with the backstory of this character. Explain to me the backstory of it, create this character in a way where I can see a mythology behind this character, and then use AI to design what the character could look like. And the output was really good, right? They use this software called Lexica.ai or Lexica.art. I can't remember the correct website name now, but it generates high-res 4K resolution images based on a prompt that you could put in. Very similar to DALL-E, which is like the cousin of ChatGPT. So that's just one way that I found that students could actually demonstrate a critical understanding of some of the themes that we were discussing without writing the traditional style essay. Writing has to be done. Does it have to be an essay? Why not a poem? Right? We here in the humanities make such a big deal about some of the poems that we have in the Caribbean, but yet still we don't give students the flexibility to do a bit of poetry even in an academic writing classroom. Why not? We don't necessarily have to be teaching creative writing to give students that kind of flexibility. Understandably, not all of us here have the same level of academic freedom. Thankfully, for me, when I designed my course, I designed the whole course, the assessment, the rubrics, the topics, everything. That might not be the same for persons who do team teaching, or you are an instructor and the head of section or department designs the curriculum and the assessment and so on. But then now we have an opportunity for a conversation about what kind of latitude we should extend to the instructor who is inside the writing context at the front of the classroom. Maybe that person needs a bit more latitude, a bit more academic freedom to explore some of these options. Take it all the way up to the level of the provost if you have to. That's what I suggest.
Thank you, Dr. Forrester. There are two more questions, and then I think I should get on to the rest of the program. So Caroline first, and then our Anthony Lewis.
Okay. Right. So the whole business about what I'm hearing a lot of is that for us who are writing academic, focus heavily on academic writing and academic literacies, one of the ways forward is to kind of have a convergence of literacies in terms of multi-literacies. So the visual and, not just the text, but image and animation, and, the students are calling for gamification to be part of your pedagogy and all of that. So it means, I guess, kind of thinking outside of the box in terms of that. One of my fundamental issues with the AI is, especially with writers that we call developmental writers, where oftentimes that pre-writing stage that many of those students grapple with, that is even deciding what is relevant or not to a topic or to a research question, is being performed by GPT. So that critical thinking that is part of our courses, right? I mean, I always start my lectures in a particular course by saying, how do I know what I think till I see what I write? How writing is a tool of thinking. It's not just a written product. It's a process, and it's the intellectual growth. And what I'm afraid of is that what happens is that students start to generate. They don't generate. They make ChatGPT generate, okay, which closes down on or doesn't give them the chance to discriminate, because many times students first draft, you're saying, but how is this relevant? And they have to go back and rethink. So that's one of my big challenges in terms of how we're not going to get ChatGPT to take away that stage of the process. And in relationship to what you said, for example, even the LinkedIn course, where you said students could do the LinkedIn course and then put it on their thing. How much of that LinkedIn course would be done via ChatGPT, so that in the end, the competencies that they're saying they have and they put on their LinkedIn profile, when you push come to shove, they really don't have those competencies. And that's my,
Yeah. Thank you for that, Caroline. What you described is a problem with just the status of education in general. Fine. People are now in this kind of situation where universities are treated as credential mills, and it's just a race to get the qualification at the end. So of course, AI can exacerbate this problem, but that is why we know, when you see a lot of these students, we call them digital natives, they don't know A from bullfoot about how to harness the power of technology for the kinds of things that you're talking, which is why, regardless of what is happening, the place of the instructor is still paramount, right? Which is why our role as, not necessarily gatekeepers, but Sherpas or guides is very important. Good. But what you described, Caroline, I think is an overarching problem that we're noticing happening in the modern university, which nowadays is really a multiversity. It's a university anymore. It's doing a bunch of different things that have nothing to do with education, frankly. And as such, it's really the kind of corporatization of the degree.
Thanks, Clive.
Yeah.
Okay, our Anthony Lewis. And after this question, we're going to move on to Raymond Onbring. If I've muddled the last name, please forgive me.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I'm going to ask us perhaps to pull a little away from the immediacy of ChatGPT. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, from the immediacy of ChatGPT, and think about what is happening in terms of epoch. What is happening is epochal. And I think when we look at the details, we're failing to appreciate the potential impact that all of this is having at the level of ethics. Right? If we go back to the printing press, for instance, we had similar concerns. The way that technology influenced how language and communication worked was epochal. When we got to typewriting, we got to the computer, those two had their impact. This has another kind of impact, but it's about the epoch. Philosophically, we have to look at the impact of technology on language and communication. And I think we're not doing that generally. We keep on going back to what we're accustomed to thinking and doing and so on. Everything that we do now, all the tools that we have been using, dictionaries, standard ways of writing sentences, all of those things are the legacy of book technology from the printing press. We don't think about it. We don't, we never even engage it when we are telling our students that you need to do X, you need to do Y. It's a different epoch that we're entering. And that epoch has an impact on communication. If we see it like that, I think a lot of the fears, a lot of the anxieties will go. Yes, there are going to be challenges. Yes, we're going to have the problem of whether they can think when they leave and so on. But these things over time fix themselves and we accommodate to dealing with them. The monks who refused to use the printing press, they died out. They who kept on writing, scribing away in dark rooms, in monasteries, they died out. And print dominated. Eventually the computer came and it has displaced print. It's about the epoch. That's my contribution. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thanks,
Lewis.
Ross.
So there is a part of this morning's proceedings that allows people to raise their beefs, their AI beefs, right? So it's what's your AI beef? And so, of course, folks get to weigh in, and we have two persons, Raymond Onbring and Charlene Wilkinson. So I'm going to invite Raymond to turn on his mic and I guess his camera as well, if he wants to do that, and tell us about his AI beef.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I don't have a great internet connection here, so I'm just going to keep my camera off. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're
Yes,
hearing you fine.
yes.
Okay, great. My name is Raymond Onbring. I am the writing program coordinator at the University of the Bahamas. Yes, thank you to everyone. Thank you to Dr. Forrester. I guess my job is to be, perform the role of dinosaur here. No, anyway, no. Yes, I agree. 100%. We need to engage technology. We cannot keep our head in the sands. Yes, we are at a epochal moment for sure. And I do think we need to think beyond the college essay. One of my great attempts to do that this semester was have students do an oral presentation in lieu of one of the assignments. And you know what I got? I got a bunch of students reading things that they got from ChatGPT. Anyway, yes, let me say I am not excited about these developments at all. I would say at the University of the Bahamas, we had a cheating crisis before. I'm just talking about the University of the Bahamas. I can't speak for anyone else, but we had a cheating crisis before the advent of ChatGPT. I'm not one who likes to moralize about writing, but it was getting bad. I think, especially coming out of COVID, with the learning loss, I don't know. I do not believe it is only a small percentage of students who are happy to cheat. I would say that up to 50% of my students are happy to cheat if I frame it like that. If I tell them, that's considered cheating if you use ChatGPT or most of the papers we were getting were using AI paraphrasing. What's the point if the assignment is if someone does the assignment and then you run it through a paraphrasing website and then submit that as their own work. I do not dispute that this technology is remarkable. I do not dispute that this technology is the future. I do not dispute that it will be used extensively in other fields of study. And I know that I will probably lose, but I am not going to capitulate to the forces of AI at this point. We should not keep in mind that the people behind these technologies, although they like to frame it as they're trying to help us communicate and improve our workflows and make our lives easier, we should not forget that, they have stolen the collective written labor of mankind without asking them. And are basically we should not forget that this is a bunch of Stanford educated tech bros who are selling out the rest of humanity for their bit of gold. This technology, ChatGPT, does not accidentally just sometimes have a wrong DOI. It gladly makes up sources, like it gladly makes up sources from top to bottom. And this is despite the fact that OpenAI has received billions of dollars in Microsoft money. Of course they could stop this. They could stop it from doing that, making up fake sources if they wanted it, if they wanted to. They could stop that easy. That would not take $1 billion. That would not take $1 million. But you know what? They want to dumb down the population. They want to they want to make us all make the majority of people have meaningless lives in low paying jobs while in the service of capital. This is they can stop this for sure, but they don't want to. I really wish that my students would take more pride in their work, and I could just trust that they wouldn't use this technology, and that they would, if they would use ChatGPT for the rough draft, and then they would improve it, and they would improve it and make it, polish it up and make it nice and their own for the final draft. Unfortunately, seems that in these quote broccoli classes, like as I like to call them, that are writing classes, they take no pride in their work, and most students want to get their minimal passing grade and move on. They do not want to turn on their brains. And I'm fine if they don't turn on their brains in the rest of their lives, but they're going to turn on their brains in my class. That's one of my goals. And yes, so I do not believe that, I understand, some professors could be excited about this in other fields, but these are writing classes. The whole point of these classes is to teach students how to write better or communicate better. And so I do not believe that we should use these technologies in writing classes in any ways. So what's my suggestion? I think we should focus more on a process approach. Yes, make the teacher more centric to the class, be more involved, connected with the students, check in with them throughout the writing process. Yes, and that's my beef.
Thank you very much for that beef. It was like a, massive steak we got there. I don't know what cut a steak. I don't know if to say sirloin. I don't know if to say it's rump roast, right? But a big steak there. So this is where we open up for discussion and responses to that particular beef. I see in the chat thread, Kadia is saying that it's interesting and there's a lot to unpack. And Kadia's hand is up immediately. So Kadia, maybe we should let you jump in and thereafter we'll invite Dr. Forrester to respond.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Katie Francis here. I teach digital literacy, so I find this conversation very, very interesting. And I've had Dr. Forrester on one of my live shows talking about this very same thing. So forgive me, I didn't catch the name of the person who just shared their grievances, but what struck me the entire time, for the entire time the person was talking, I was like, oh no, oh no.
His name is Raymond Ownbring.
Yes,
Onbring,
Raymond.
all right. Hi, Raymond.
I
So,
have.
I would love to have a conversation with you to unpack some of that because one of the things I would hope that we get from this is the inevitability of this technology. We can't go around it or go past it. It's not going anywhere. It's just going to get more so. So how is it that academia plans to deal with this thing? This is something you have to grapple with. So just to say, I would prefer my students not to use this. It's I think it's an unreasonable request because if you have a tool that can assist you to do something better, because that's the point of technology, isn't it? To make our lives easier, to make our lives better. Why is it that academia say, no, your life must be hard? This must be a hard thing because that hard thing is the test of your mettle, right? Why? If I can do it easier and faster and produce better, why would you want to hold them back from doing that? Especially because when they get out into the real world, this is something that they're going to have to grapple with, which is why I said in the chat that, somebody earlier was asking about how do we test to see if they're learning or test their critical thinking. Prompt writing is a highly cognitive skill. It's a skill that you actually have to really put a lot of learning into. A lot of training goes into prompt writing, and that in and of itself is proof of critical thinking. You know what I'm saying? So it's
Why teach Spanish why teach foreign language if they can just use translators? Why teach basic math if they can just use calculators?
Because all of us are not Spanish speakers, though. And if I am going into a space with Spanish speakers, I want to be able to communicate with that person.
Writing teachers. This is a writing teachers forum.
Well, could I interject
but
just quickly?
What is the outcome of that, though, in the real world? What's the outcome of that in the real world? And I'm saying these students have to grapple also with the real world. So how is academia also playing their part to ensure that these students are wholly prepared for the real world, telling them not to use a technology that they're going to have to probably use sometime in the future in the real world?
They use it outside of the class, outside in the rest of their lives.
Boy.
But I don't want them to use it in my class.
Could I interject really quickly and that's it. So Raymond, one of the things that I would say is that a very long time ago, like 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years ago, when the Socratic method of teaching was developed, how Socrates would teach his students is that he would walk through Athens with his students and he would pose a question and a student would offer a response, and then Socrates would pose another question and another student would respond, and then he'd pose another question, and they did this dialectic for the entire day, and they started again the next day. And the Socratic method of teaching is one of those foundational ways of teasing out this critical thinking skills that a lot of us are talking about. Now, that Socratic method of teaching was made possible by the fact that there was one professor and 5 students. So much has changed, in the nature of education, and especially on the university campuses, right? A lot of the instructors here are teaching classes upwards of 40 students, right? And you have 5 sections of classes like that for the week. Now, everybody's going to be burnt out, student and instructor, at the end of the term. And you see it on social media. You see your colleagues on social media bawling about how the essay marking is cutting into Christmas, right? And essay marking is going to cut their vacation straight, or you see the post marking essay and a half empty bottle of wine at their desk. Right? So you see, I agree with you, Raymond. There is something about the beauty of getting students to think critically about the world around them, about engaging in the process, not necessarily the output of writing, and the enjoyment in discovering the culture and beauty of a different land or different people via studying a foreign language. I totally agree with you. And I want us to maintain all of these things. The problem comes in when we are forced to assess people. Do you think, which do you think, Raymond, would be more successful? If I want to learn a foreign language, wouldn't it be better for me to simply go into this new context, this new environment, fall in love, go for an adventure? Or do I sit in a classroom with you, the professor, 50 other students, jostling for your attention, and then have, 3-4 Spanish essays to write during the term? So it is the structure of university education today, which kind of deteriorates a lot of the beauty of teaching that we hope to engender and we hope to achieve. It's not artificial intelligence that's doing this. We've already been down this trajectory. I mean, AI might speed it up a bit, but we've already gone down that trajectory, and removing AI will not cause a detour. That's what I feel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Forrester. Caroline?
What I wanted to weigh in on is the whole, this forum, a lot of it is about ethics. What is ethical? What are we to accept in academic writing as being ethical? Now, someone said that, it's technology's development, and you can do things quicker and easier. But yeah, you can do things that are perverse quicker and easier as well. I mean, look at the whole scamming, in Jamaica and thing that has been enabled by technology, right? So the truth is that you still have to look and see, in the end, there is something called, what is ethical. And so what I think a lot of old-time teachers of writing like myself, and dare I say Raymond as well, one of the things that we value is knowing that, in fact, this is the person, and we speak in our courses a lot about developing the writer's voice, the writer's voice. And these are some of the things that we have to grapple with when we now talk about Quillbot and all of the use of the AI, etc. It does rob students who decide to go heavily in that direction from putting the words together and getting the joy. I mean, maybe am I the only one, because of finding just that particular word that says it, and the conciseness and the clarity and all of that. And so, yes, a lot of our students are not, lexophiles like we are. They're not in that space. And many of them, our courses are, a burden, right? What we try to do is, by the end of the semester, show them that even if it's not a joy, it is something that is precious, and that is can become a part of them and enhance them and their whole way of thinking, etc. So yeah, I think that whole business about, no, we're not gonna be able to escape it, but we certainly have to be very careful. One of the things you said, Clive, was that I can't remember which country, students 18 and under, they had banned ChatGPT, banned them from using it, or the internet in school. There's a reason for that.
Italy, it was Italy,
right? Because you want to give them a chance to be them without the help of the AI, and then you can use it judiciously at some point. But that's the whole thing. And then, of course, the ethics is big in all of this. Yeah, over and out.
Okay, Deidre, and then after Deidre, I would want to invite Charlene Wilkinson to give us her brief.
Thank you. Caroline, I think that a combination of things.
will assist us in achieving what you described just now. I think the policies will help. But we don't want to make the use of AI solely punitive. And so how we work with the students within the classroom, how we design the assessments will help. How we grade the assessments will help in achieving our goals, even while facilitating the use of AI. Based on my experience, when it comes on to giving certain specifics, when it comes on to information that is culturally relevant, etc., the students will need to put in a lot of that kind of detail, and the way that the rubrics, so we won't be able to go forward using the same old things that we have been using. We look back at what we have, how we design the assessments, how we grade the assessments, in addition to what the students do within the classroom, that with the policy as well. It's a combination of things that are going to, I think, get us through this period and alleviate some of the fears that we have.
Thank you very much, Deidre. So now I want to move on to Charlene Wilkinson's beef, and of course, all of the conversation that is likely to be generated from that. So Charlene, I'm inviting you now to share your beef with us.
Yes, Rhoda, thanks. I realize that the conversation has gotten beyond the topic, has burst the seams of the topic. And I was just chuckling to myself and thinking, it's almost transformed to ethical uses of academic writing in human intelligence. And Clive, of all the things you said today, I only disagree with one thing, and that is the statement you made, and I wrote it down. Writing has to be done. And I circled the has with a big question mark. Writing has to be done. I mean, if I come to dancing school, I know dancing has to be done because I've chosen to come to dancing school. But I know we focused on the notion of the ethical uses of artificial intelligence in academic writing. But I also want to point to the fact that Dr. Lewis talked about the new epoch that we're approaching. And I know that Raymond doesn't want to find himself dressed in monk's clothes going down with the old scribes of yesterday. I can't see Raymond going down that way. So I know that while he gave his beef, the wheels are also turning about how we can deal with this matter of when students write. And I think Caroline has already talked about when they need to use writing to find their voice. The artificial intelligence definitely has to take a back seat. And Clive also pointed out the fact that he implied that they're not born cheats, that the system actually turns them into cheats. And I agree with that. So I know this kind of discussion made me think about a book that I read years ago, and I've forgotten what's inside it, and I had to dig it up again. It's a book called The Schooling of Society by Ivan Illich, where he literally accused the school of blurring process and substance, of mistaking the teaching process with actual learning, assuming that instruction produces learning and all of that. And my question to the presenters and anybody else is, if we are to transform from being gatekeepers for a particular language and a particular kind of knowledge system, which really is what we're doing in all our universities across the Caribbean and even further afield, I'm coming from a society where we have 10 other languages in Guyana, and all the cognitive wealth of those languages are being subsumed in something else. The speakers of those languages are really asked to hide their knowledge in order to move forward in English. I'm also coming from a Caribbean where people's suffering, in particular the people of Haiti, seems to be an academic matter, while our students sit, if they're lucky, they learn about what's happening in Haiti, for example. So my question is, how can we use technology in this new epoch to transform education, to make it serve human evolution, even as it is itself rapidly evolving? Moving away from the notion that writing is producing something out of an instructional process. I guess I'm asking several questions at the same time, but I'll stop. Carolyn said I could talk for 5 minutes, but I prefer to put it out there and hear from you. So how do we deschool the university? Because if we don't begin that process, the rest of education will remain what it is. Schooling, gatekeeping,
Turning out credentials.
yes, that kind of thing. So I'm going to throw it out now to everybody to bounce that about.
Yeah, Charlene, it's good to see you. Looking
Yeah,
forward to seeing you next year in Guyana as well. Let me
Oh,
tell you,
yes, definitely.
that question is the question. Fine. So all of this grappling with AI, as Rowan reminded us earlier, is only a matter of time before there is something else, right? So today, all the instructors are using computer generated writing. 100 years ago, that would have seemed like sorcery. Fine. Today, we are talking about artificial intelligence in the academic context. Years from now, there's going to be something else. There's always going to be something else. But what you are asking about, Charlie, which I think is the quintessential question, is how do we preserve the soul, the kind of spirit of education that we talk about, we romanticize about it, but then we build institutions which do the opposite. We build institutions and we design programs and we design courses and we pack classes with students and kind of betray the same kind of question that you're trying to get at, Charlene. One of the things that practitioners of writing instruction are indeed worried about is when the higher ups in the university administration gets wind of the ease at which academic writing and academic studies can be facilitated by artificial intelligence, it's going to be justification to increase class sizes now, right? Yeah, I mean, you have 25 students, you may as well have 70, because if so much of the writing work can be offloaded to artificial intelligence, then why not increase your class size? And let me tell you, you see, when next year comes and we are dealing with what is going to be called spatial computing, which is augmented virtual reality, that kind of thing, now an instructor will be able to project themselves via hologram into classrooms at several different places on the campus, right? What's the point of having these tiny classrooms when technology can allegedly facilitate you teaching hundreds of students at the same level of effectiveness? This is the kind of thing that we're going to have to deal with in the years to come. So what you're asking, Charlene, is a very important question. And yeah, we're talking about AI and AI ethics, but that is where the problem lies. We're kind of losing the soul of what it means to be educated in the university these days. People are just coming to get the credentials, they're coming to get the piece of paper, And guess what? The university has to pay all of us our nice salaries. So the university has to engage in these frivolous marketing strategies and kinds of things which betray the same spirit of education, but manages to keep the university solvent, manages to keep them afloat. Right now, the University of West Indies is under severe financial strain, right? And what can you do? Good. So I don't know how to answer the question, but to say that that is the heart of the matter. Fine. The various ways in which we have moved away from what really and truly is now a romanticized version of education. That is what we need to get back to. And very likely it will not be accomplished in the traditional residential style university, like a lot of these big research institutions that we have today. That's what I have to say.
I mean,
Just now, I'm just checking to see if there are any other raised hands. Are there any further questions? Anybody else wants to weigh in on the various beefs that we would have been listening to this morning? So, Dr. Forrester, I'm wondering, are you prepared for the changes that will be coming to academia? Because based on the conversations that we've all been participating in here this morning, and I have to say the formal discussions were very good. The chat thread was its own space and discussion.
Its own universe.
Right, own universe was that chat thread. The things that I'm hearing coming out of the chat thread, and of course what you are saying and other persons that have contributed here, is that the way in which academia has been conducting itself has no choice but to change, because the software is not going to go away. The technology is not going to go away. The tools, the AI, none of those things are going to go away. So it means that tertiary education, academia has to adapt. What are you seeing as the key things, the major things, the major adaptations that academia will have to go through?
Yeah. So any answer I give right now is entirely speculation.
Okay.
I can kind of predict and forecast.
So you can't be an Obia man this morning. You'll try, but you can't be an Obia man this morning.
Can't be a full Obia man this morning, but I'll try.
Gotcha.
So one of the discussions we had in one of my academic writing classes, because if you do like formal reading on artificial intelligence, so even before the boom in artificial intelligence now, scientists, and even philosophers have speculated about the kind of potential that artificial intelligence, and especially sentient artificial intelligence, will have on humanity. And there's one school of thought that it will mean the end of work. So I've posed to students, what would you do with your lives if work wasn't necessary? We didn't have to work, because what's the point of developing artificial intelligence if we still have to be working, right? So the sun hot, fine, it is the hottest it's ever been on planet Earth every week, right? So this idea of going out to work is something that is kind of getting antiquated, and there's going to come a point when presumably some scientists and philosophers suggest that artificial intelligence will get to a point where we will no longer need to do any sort of work, and at that point we'll be faced with an existential crisis. So much of our worth and identities is intricately linked to what we do occupationally, or what we aspire to do occupationally. And in many ways, that is going to be one of the biggest existential crises that humanity will face, barring some kind of alien invasion, is when there's no longer need to do any kind of work. And you now have you have a life of leisure to simply sit back and explore the world.
Yes, but we are
So-
creating a society now where robots are writing poetry and the vast majority of people are toiling away in meaningless jobs, where we want it to be the
Yes.
other way around.
It should be the other way around. You're right. It should be the other way around. And as I said, this is just one school of thought, that we will get to a point where there will no longer be need for human toil, right? And I am the dreamer, the optimistic person, and I believe that it may not be in our lifetime, but obviously there has to be some point at which all of this, pointless drudgery that we engage in from the time we enter adulthood until the time we retire will become unnecessary. So, Rhoda, to kind of respond to your question, that is what, when we get to that stage, that is where I think this whole idea, so this university thing will have faded away by that time. And what you'll have is a context where persons have the freedom, the luxury, without the burden of worrying about tuition costs, to explore the outer limits of our imaginations and the horizons of the universe.
I will listen. We will have to pick this up via email because you're raising issues of basic minimum income there now, and that's a whole economic discussion that I don't want to take this particular thing down that line. Caroline has her hand raised, so I'm going to take Caroline's question.
It's not really a question for Clive. It's just a comment on, a couple of things. One of the things that Clive raised that really struck me, and that I think has implications for how we go forward, is about the model of university education that we have, and certainly in terms of our academic writing divisions, which is, the long essays, the several pieces of long writing, and it coinciding with other courses having the same kinds of demands in terms of assignments, and how the students reacting to that, feeling overwhelmed and not particularly enjoying any of these writing experiences, and kind of being turned off. And I think, this has been, we have kind of just, we try our best, but this is how it is. And, there's some sufferation that happens in your university, learning. I think we really have to, and of course, the implications it has for us, as you say, the burnout and the fact that, during the Christmas and the Easter and whatever, we're marking papers. So it is really an opportune time for us to try to look at those challenges that we face in our particular sphere, and see how we can get AI to, make it better for us. So I think that's a big one. The whole business about using AI for functional and utilitarian writing, like, the course outlines and stuff. I mean, it's really a no-brainer in a sense, but many of us might not even have been thinking that way. So I think it's something that we can really leverage going forward. My daughter the other day was doing a letter of application for a summer job, and, she just put in her stuff and it was done, just immediately. And is that really, I don't have a problem with that, because that's something, very utilitarian. So I think if we can kind of look at those aspects of our jobs and really, as I say, leverage the AI there, that would be great. The other thing is, I think we're going to have to accept, I mean, this semester when I was marking papers, I've never seen such good English in all my life. So all of us who were now dealing with these students who have challenges with English, and for most of whom English is a second language or even a foreign language, in the developmental English courses, have to realize now that, guess what? Students are going to use Quillbot or Grammarly or whatever to do the surface correctness. And so that's the whole point. Do we now say, okay, well, we don't care if they actually know the rules of subject-verb agreement or apostrophe or plurals? Should they still know that? And then what kind of role does that play in terms of how we teach the courses? So that's something you know, but the point that Rohan made about, you know, we are in an epochal moment. I've been talking about this kind of paradigm shift, and feeling very much like the dinosaur, but remembering when I just started teaching at UE and was shocked at the weaknesses in terms of English language proficiency, I came across an article, and it was speaking about the evolution of literacy. And it said, you know, back in the days in England, when you had the nobility, the nobleman used to compose, the scribe used to write. So the things were very divided, okay? So the nobleman didn't need to know how to write because he had the scribe there. So, I mean, I guess ChatGPT, in a sense, is that can be that scribe, which means we have to now kind of forget the whole business of structure, of sentence, and all those things that are in our rubrics, which we're going to now have to change, but then perhaps look more at the higher level skills, you know, or we have to decide how much of it do they need to know. Should they show us a draft before they put it through all of the different AI and things? So that's basically some of the thoughts that came. But yeah, thanks a lot, Clive. Really was stimulating.
Yes, agreed. Now, in the chat right now, everybody discussing the existential crisis that is about to come on as a result of the use of ChatGPT. So I want to jump in here and say this. There's a lot that we've discussed here today. We've talked about the ethical implications. We've talked about using ChatGPT, the practical ways in which it can be incorporated, that we should be looking at embracing it as opposed to being afraid of it. Underlying all of that, I think, is change and the necessity for change. Whether it is just change with respect to your assessment, how you are assessing students, and then of course change in terms of academia. So might the real issue here that we kind of stepping around and dancing around be fear of the change that this artificial intelligence software has no doubt introduced, not just into academia, but into the entire world.
Yes, you are correct. It's a fear. You know, whenever you start to push up against the boundaries, the uncertainty of what lies beyond tends to force some to either step back, or, you know, all of a sudden these persons become Warner women and Warner man. No, don't go any further. Fine, you're going to destroy society and that kind of thing. One of the things I can tell you though is that I'm very pleased by the fact that we here as Caribbean persons are having this discussion, because this discussion has been ongoing in North America and in Europe, and I've been privy to some of these discussions, and I can tell you that some of the things that we are discussing here hasn't been touched on in some of these other forums as yet. And there's this thinking that because, you know, we belong to developing societies, that we are always playing the catch-up game, but that is not true. Fine. Some of the discussions and some of the suggestions and some of the ideas coming out of this forum that I've heard today are, I'd like to say, more advanced than some of what I've been hearing, listening to some of these folks here in Canada, right? And it is important that we keep on asking these questions, keep on exploring what will be the implications when we start to answer these same questions, and find innovative and hopefully creative ways in which we can meet the challenge for the next leg of the journey, right? What the university is today is very likely not what the founders of university education intended it to be, right? We've in many ways moved very far from the mark, for better and for worse, because, well, at least one of the good things about the university education now is that it's a little bit more accessible to larger portions of society, but at the same time, it has become so corporatized that you know, we have all of these concerns about cheating and people just coming to get the qualification and not leaving with any kind of, you know, real foundational critical thinking skills. But all we can do right now is try to hypothesize and try to think about the various ways in which this technology, as well as other technologies, will impact on academia, on the university, and society at large, and not be afraid and not step away and not shy away. As people, you say, oh, this Dr. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so, in many ways, we have a responsibility as persons who are, highly educated, because we're kind of entrusted, by society to lead in certain areas. So it's going to be important that whenever we ask a lot of the questions that we're asking here today, we see ourselves as people that can actualize the answers. We see ourselves as persons that can actually shape the way in which artificial intelligence impacts on the university and society at large, not just in the Caribbean, but globally as well. That is how our outlook will have to be. It's just a tiny fraction of us that managed to graduate from a university globally. And we can't afford that when the important questions of our time is being asked, we shy away from that kind of thing. We need to be at the forefront.
So you can mention the good, thank them on behalf of
That's what I think.
Will do.
Yeah.
Will do.
Okay,
Thanks.
fine. Yeah.
Right? So we need to be at the forefront. That's how I see things. So this discussion and others that will take place in subsequent months is going to be very important.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here, and I am going to thank Dr. Forrester. I am going to thank Raymond Owenbring. I am going to thank Charlene Wilkinson. I am thanking Sophia Edwards, and of course, I'm thanking Caroline and the entire Catalp team that would have been part of organizing this. The conversation this morning was nothing short of robust. Very interesting, kept my attention the entire time, so I didn't venture onto Chat GPT at all to entertain myself. This was really good. Lots of food for thought here, because I feel like there are conversations that I'm definitely going to be having with my colleagues back at St. Augustine about how we're approaching assessment of the students, and of course looking at the structure of our courses and course outlines to see what it allows us to do, and of course to get people's feedback about what they're comfortable with doing, because I think that's one of the major takeaways for me from what Raymond had to say. I was looking at comfort levels, what people are comfortable with, whether or not we're forcing people to adopt and adapt to something that they're not yet mentally ready or even emotionally ready to adapt to. I'm also not ignoring the underlying concerns about academic rigor, because that's there in a lot of what was said in the actual presentations, and then of course the entire chat that was taking place on the side. So academic rigor is important, and what we're doing with respect to developing critical thinking in the current and future generations. And of course, the impact of technology, what technology means to any industry, any sector, any society, and how technology can shape and reshape all of those things for us. So to everyone that was present here, because we had more than 80 persons for the duration of this conversation. So it was very well attended, very robust, and you can always tell when a conversation like this is interesting and engaging through the chat. And so that's why I kept looking at the chat and looking at the kind of conversation taking place in the chat. I think that the chat alone has yielded so much interesting information. So I want to thank all of us that took the time out of their schedules today to be here, to offer ideas, to offer conversation, to offer dialogue, and to the team that prepared and brought this very, very interesting and robust discussion to us. Thank you to all of you. And yeah,
It
we
wasn't
could
my
say-
job for that, but I also want to thank you for facilitating the entire presentation that we had today. I think you did an excellent job of keeping things moving and helping us to see where the real issues are and guiding the discussion. So I also want to thank you for your part.
Oh, thank you
Okay.
so much, Sophia. This was fun. This was a lot of fun.
Okay.
I knew it was going to be interesting, but I didn't think it was going to be as much fun as it turned out to be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one last bit, and just of course, on behalf of Catalp, and Clover isn't here because in her wearing her many hats, she had to be chairing a panel elsewhere, but she was very much instrumental in getting this forum together. So just wanted to big up Clover and the UTech team that facilitated the Zoom call. And just to tell you that there is a working paper out now by the Modern Language Association and College Composition and Communication Conference. They had a joint task force and they have put out a working paper called Writing and AI, which is, I guess, where they have a lot of their suggestions in terms of assessment and policy. I'm kind of hesitant to look at it before we meet for ourselves, not being unduly influenced. Look at it. Right.
Check it.
It's
Because
good.
I mentioned it in the paper that
in the paper.
I'm working on.
Okay. All
as
right.
well. So they have like about 12 recommendations.
Okay.
Not with examples or anything like kind of high level recommendations, but good recommendations nonetheless.
Okay. All right. Yes, Rhoda, signing off.
Yes,
Okay.
I think we should sign off now and allow everybody to get back to their respective lives. But I guess because the conversation was so good now, we find it hard to let go. Not even Dr. Forrester logging out and saying he have to run and go teach class and things.
Okay.
Could I just big up Clive, our own resident in quotation marks, expert on this thing, because he's the one that brought my attention to this in November of last year. So, and he has been very good coming to make presentations for us at different levels in the Caribbean, even though he's domiciled now in Canada. So Clive, big up and thanks very much for the work.
Yeah, man, respect you, man. And it's good to see so many familiar people, Shalika, Deidre, Tashika, Tarika, Longest Tarika, Pamela Kelly, oh my goodness. So it's good to see so many familiar names in the room here. And as I said, right now I'm in the Caribbean as far as I'm concerned, right? And we're having this discussion among Caribbean folk, but it don't mean that we can't influence things on a global level as well, because nobody is an expert yet. Nobody can claim, say, me are the expert, me at the forefront at the team right now. No. And if anybody is going to claim so, it might as well be somebody from the Caribbean.
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
So we shouldn't feel like that we're on the periphery. No, absolutely not, right? We are having the same kind of intense, important discussions that some of these jokers are having over here in Canada. So yeah.
Okay.